So a client will come in and she talks about, I just noticed like I'm just attracted to the wrong guys all the time. Like the guys that I'm attracted to don't want a relationship or they're like hot and heavy. And then all of a sudden they just disappear. And so the first thing I ask is like, well, what was your parents' relationship like? And they're like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. They're like together, but they don't even like each other. And so I was like, okay, so let's talk about that. And they're like, well, why would that affect me? And I'm like, well, that was what you saw, right? You're attracted to people that don't really either want to stay, that don't want to get close, where it's scary to get close. And so you're attracted to what you're trying to remedy, what was hurt for you as a child of seeing two people that weren't really that connected, stayed together maybe for the family. And so we're always trying to fix those wounds.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Truth with Lauren Season 2. Welcome back if you're a Season 1 listener, and welcome for the first time if you're tuning in for the first time. We are going to be talking all about the messy realities of navigating your 20s this season, and I am promising you real, stripped down conversations about work, friendship, dating, self-worth, and the growing pains that no one warns you about at this age. Hopefully, you will feel a little less alone after listening. I'm your host, Lauren, a 29-year-old professional living in DC, passionate about creating spaces for open conversations and building genuine community. And I am so glad you're here. Thank you so much to our Season 2 podcast sponsors, Kelly Miller, Marika and Batman Pierce, Pauline Shu, and Jenny Porter. I couldn't do this without you. Today, we have a guest who's going to help us peel back the layers on something many of us carry, maybe even without realizing it. And that is trauma. We're out here focused on self-improvement, hitting the gym daily, reading self-help books, but what happens when the things holding us back aren't just a lack of motivation, but rather deep, unhealed wounds from the past that show up as imposter syndrome or relationship struggles? That's why I'm excited to welcome Michelle Nosrati, a licensed clinical social worker specializing in trauma and complex trauma. Michelle helps adults release the emotional baggage that holds them back and heal from childhood emotional abuse, complex PTSD, and long-standing survival patterns. She's licensed in California and Nevada and extensively trained and certified in both EMDR and trauma-focused CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. And we'll get into what EMDR means when we talk in this interview. For more context on Michelle's background, her early work in the nonprofit sector focused on intimate partner violence with both adults and children. And then she later opened a private practice to continue this healing work. Using EMDR and a trauma-informed mind-body approach, Michelle supports clients in processing the past, reconnecting with themselves, and building healthier, more grounded lives. Get ready to finally understand the why behind your struggles. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Well, this is such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yay, I'm so excited. And we were just remembering the first time we met. Someone asked me how we met recently, and I was like, I have no idea. And Michelle was like, yeah, we connected on Instagram. I reached out to her. I liked her work, and I've been looking more into EMDR therapy, and I find it fascinating. So I reached out to see if she'd be willing to come on the pod, and she was so willing.
Yes, I was very excited and also very nervous because this is definitely out of my wheelhouse, but so happy to be here. So thanks.
Yes, we love pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones.
Exactly. That's what we have to do, right? Especially to heal trauma.
Yes, exactly. Okay, starting on a light note, though,
Mm,
what's been
yes.
your high and low of the past week?
Definitely watching a couple of wins with my kids at school, noticing them like pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, actually getting like an email from my child's teacher saying that she went above and beyond to like the first one to help someone getting on their computer and doesn't hesitate and is always there to help. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just kind of the best nugget of like, okay, I'm planting seeds well, and it just feels so good. So, and then my daughter is like just doing so well in this new transition. So that's been definitely a high. A low is Thanksgiving just passed and holidays are approaching. And so just trying to kind of get to my to-dos and trying to figure out how do I how do I balance all the to-dos after you have a big long break. But we get better at it every day. So definitely something I'm working on.
That is so relatable. One comment on the high, proud mom moment. That's
Oh,
incredible. And you're raising amazing humans. So that's really cool
I
to hear
hope.
that feedback.
Yes, it's like the thing you aspire to every day, and you're just going, "Is it? What am I doing?" We're making mistakes, but then we're doing some really good things along the way. So that feels great. Yeah.
100%. And then also on the low note, I definitely feel that. So we are recording this in December and it won't
Yes.
come out until season 2 of the podcast. But I have been feeling that too. And actually, in my weekly newsletter, which comes out every Monday, this past Monday, I wrote like a really short one because I was feeling overwhelmed by my to do list. And I remember working in corporate previously, like coming back from a couple days off for around like Thanksgiving break
Yeah.
or the holiday. And I would come back to an inbox that's like thousands of unread messages. And it's just so overwhelming and stressful. And I was like, I don't want to add to my stress or anyone else's in this short gratitude weekly newsletter. Sometimes I include like a personal story or something that's happened in my life recently before I get into my gratitude list and the community's gratitude list, like what they've shared with me. And this time I was like, yo, I'm going to keep it really short. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sure you're overwhelmed. I don't want to add to anyone's stress.
Yes.
This is the last thing I want to do during this time. So I hope you take this moment to pause. And then I literally bulleted out 4 breaths basically and wrote like pause in all caps. And then you'd scroll down and you'd see breathe in and then 4 dots and then hold and then breathe out, just like we did like the breathing before this.
I love that. It's so genius. And you're right. Like it's actually being real and not having to outperform yourself or make something that's even better or more genius, but it's just being honest and everybody needs a pause around that time. So yeah, that's great. And I want to get on your newsletter. I need to get on there.
I'll send you the link after this.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
you would like it for sure. Plug too. If anyone wants to sign up, you can go to thenakedtruthwithlauren.com and sign up there.
Perfect.
To kick things off in our deeper conversation, can you actually
Yes.
share a bit about your personal journey and what made you interested in becoming a therapist in the first place?
I always wanted to help. I was looking at like a yearbook when I was in elementary school, and I think I said I wanted to be a nurse. I always wanted to be part of the helping profession. I just didn't know how. So I remember wanting to work in the trenches and like be someone's advocate so they didn't feel alone. It just felt like my mission in life. And as I was going through school, I realized, okay, I think I want to be a social worker, but I knew that I probably wanted children. And so I wanted to have some balance in my life. And I wanted to be able to also have the possibility of having my own private practice and probably not believing it myself actually when I was younger. And so being like, I want to do this, but I want to open the doors for this if I want it as well. And so social work just kind of seemed like a good match because I could get licensed later on and then start my private practice. And I loved it. As soon as I started working in the nonprofit world and it was beautiful. And then after I had kids, I wanted to start my private practice, which gave me the flexibility of being able to plant the seeds for my children and actually be present. So that's what led me to being a LCSW.
That's awesome. And so why that versus the typical psychology route?
So I was contemplating. I think I had some imposter syndrome as a kid. And I was like, I couldn't be a doctor. Like that couldn't be me. I had difficulty with memorization. I think later on I started to realize I think I might have some dyslexia. And it was never diagnosed until it still hasn't been diagnosed. But I think that I do have some dyslexia, which led to like some difficulties with memorization and test taking. So part of it was I didn't believe in myself, but I knew that I wanted to help. And so going through the path of going to grad school and getting my master's and then starting to feel like, okay, I could actually do this and go on. I was able to get my license and got it pretty quickly. It was really strategic. I wanted to do it before I even had children. I got pregnant. And so all of that was under my belt before I had children. So I was thinking about going into the Psych D realm. But honestly, I didn't believe in myself, first of all, which is kind of sad, but I'd like to admit that. And also like I didn't want to just be a person that worked in an office. I wanted to work with people and I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector. So two reasons, but yeah, I think those are the ones that stick out for me now.
I appreciate that you admitted that you didn't believe in yourself because that's so much more common than people think. just yesterday as I'm on this newer full-time entrepreneurship
Mm.
path. The believing in yourself is like a full-time job. And so I
Yes.
have a lot in place where I will do like daily affirmations and
Mhm.
journal and all of these
Yes.
things, meditate to really visualize what I want in the future and manifestation techniques that I've used in my life.
Yeah.
And yesterday was one of the first time, it wasn't the first time, I don't want to say, but I was just in a really low mood and it was
Mm.
just really tough. There was a lot of self-doubt and imposter syndrome I was struggling with, and I'm like, it's been about 10 months since I left corporate, and I'm nowhere near the financial goals that I've set, and I'm like, "Holy crap, how am I gonna do this?
Yes.
How am I going to build out this business? I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed and exhausted, and how am I going to get clients to actually sign contracts? I'm going back and forth with several people, but kind of having a one-sided conversation and they're not responding and the holidays is a very busy time. I understand, but it's very frustrating when like you have these awesome opportunities, but nothing's in writing and then like all of a sudden they ghost you and you're having trouble getting a response. So I was just really struggling with that. And I know that it's super common, but it can prevent you from, following your dreams and taking certain actions in your life.
Absolutely. In fact, I like that you're mentioning it because everyone has it. Imposter syndrome is kind of this blanket term that we all use, but everyone doesn't feel good enough to a certain extent. It just depends on what it is. And, bringing that trauma element in, and it's usually not just like the contract, it's what the past is always present. So, what does that contract symbolize to you? When were other times where you feel like I'm so close, but I'm not getting there? Like that makes us feel like we're successful. A certain amount in the bank makes us feel like we've made it. When really, as soon as we make that certain amount of money, it's always what's the next goal. So it's always kind of interesting when we use that trauma lens and play the investigator and go, okay, so what's really happening here? It's about me closing this deal or like getting all the things on my to-do list done that I'm finally going to be good enough. So
Yeah.
it's always a little deeper, but I love that you're sharing that because we all go through it.
Yeah. And I like that you bring that up because I was going to ask you, how are these feelings of not feeling good enough or not being good enough rooted in unhealed past experiences and not in reality?
So, not being good enough is also one of those big blanket statements. So, when we look back, we want to look back at when were some of those moments where we felt like I will finally be loved or good enough if I do these certain things. It can be in these nuances of feeling rejected by caretakers. It can feel like the test. What if you got an A minus and you came home and you show your parents and your parents go, why not an A? Why not an A plus? Right. So those little remarks that some people really take to heart of like, it's not about how hard I've tried, but it's about that grade that I've gotten or the amount that's in the child saved up in their piggy bank or how they've made mistakes. So it's always these nuances of things that happened and the messages that they're getting either by caretakers, people they love, these people maybe they don't respect, teachers that we start to actually identify ourselves as. So everyone has them. They're always just a little bit different. The key is to start to play the investigator of like, where did I get these messages from?
Yeah, very interesting. I'm currently located in DC, and
Mhm.
it's a city of career focused high achievers. And I know that many high achievers, my friends, myself included, especially in competitive cities like DC, maybe like New York, etc., feel like they always have to be on or they struggle with work life balance. Can you explain how this constant striving can sometimes be a trauma response?
Yeah, it depends. So I can't make a blanket statement that it's always a trauma response, but I can say for some, if there's been a lot of nervous system distress in your childhood, if you're always walking on eggshells, if you feel like you're constantly struggling for affirmations from parents or people around you to be good enough, then it could be a trauma response where you feel like you need to outperform everybody. Being on might mean like, what is that protecting you from? Being on, being liked, being successful, does that make you feel safe? Is it about money? Is it about prestige? What is it about being on and being successful that helps your nervous system feel safe? I always look at it through the lens of we're always trying to feel safe somehow. Is it through being good enough? Is it being loved? Is it if I get this promotion, then I'll finally be loved by everyone. I'll finally be good enough? Is it around money, where your financial success means that you'll finally be stable? It will mean protection. It will mean food. It will mean shelter. And sometimes that can be a trauma response, but it's not always. But look at what that on means for you. What does it mean? Look behind what on means, is my kind of answer.
Let me think of an example, like, for
Yes.
myself of what that "on" means. I know that I have a high work ethic, and I feel like I need to be productive all the time, and sometimes I feel guilty for resting, or I feel like it's lazy and I'm not producing anything, like, of use, if that makes sense, with my time. So, how would you recommend starting to investigate that?
How did your parents gauge rest? Did they rest? Was it
No.
seen as being lazy? It
I do
didn't.
not rest.
They don't rest, right? Is it seen as being unproductive? Is it seen as being lazy?
Yeah, I
Right.
think for the most part.
So think about it. Your first like blueprint of what resting means and not being productive means I'm not good enough. I can't be, you can't be safe. Like taking care of yourself, your body, your mind means you're lazy, or resting means you're lazy. So when you really think about it, it's not logical. It's your body going, I need to stay moving or something bad's going to happen, or I'm bad, right? It's a nervous system thing. That's the cool part. And then we haven't really talked about what EMDR is, but it goes deeper than just this conscious, like, oh, I'm just going to take a nap, because your body, your nervous system isn't actually relaxing, even though you're telling yourself to relax, because it feels like it's doing something wrong. So it's cool to start looking at your first role models, your first blueprint for what happened to you. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, very interesting. And yeah, I've done a little bit of this exploration in my exposure with cognitive behavioral therapy so far. But you
Right.
mentioned EMDR, and I want to know, like, for people who have never heard of it in the audience,
Yes.
what is EMDR and what kind of issues can it help with?
So EMDR is any type of bilateral movement.
Is it like hearing things in like the left ear versus the right ear?
You can do it in so many different ways, which I love because over the years it's been adapted. Whereas before it was called eye movement desensitization because they use their eyes. But they started to realize that it wasn't just with your eyes. I use a program where if we're doing EMDR virtually, where they'll see this ball or a shape, it can be a heart, whatever you want it to be, moving back and forth. And sometimes we use headsets. And then they also get the auditory bilateral stimulation or sound. Some people don't like to move their eyes, like it gives them a headache. So we use tapping or we use little buzzers that vibrate bilaterally. There's so many ways of doing it. And what I've noticed is some people they respond better in the office with buzzers. It tends to calm their nervous system. So everyone can find their preference, but it's that bilateral movement that helps your brain store the information and the memory in a more factual way instead of how we've stored it when there's been a trauma.
Interesting. Okay. And then for those of you who are listening and not watching the video, Michelle was tapping each shoulder like one at a
Yes.
time. And that's a physical way that EMDR therapy can happen, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so, can you elaborate on the difference between traditional talk therapy and EMDR therapy?
So talk therapy is an umbrella statement, right? There's so many different types of talk therapy. There's like psychodynamic, there's CBT, right? DBT, there's just so many. And they all have a wonderful place and they're usually beautiful modalities, right? But EMDR actually goes into your subconscious, uses that your brain's natural ability to heal itself, that adaptive information processing, and just like it gives it a loving nudge to be able to heal it yourself with your own brain. It almost sounds like witchcraft when you really think about it, of like, okay, I'm moving my eyes back and forth, but you're stimulating almost like the REM cycle. Like when we're dreaming, you'll notice if you've ever seen someone dreaming, their eyes dart back and forth, or
Oh,
you'll see
I've never seen that. That's cool though.
so you're doing it in REM sleep. That's why like sometimes, you've had dreams about something that's happened because your brain is naturally trying to process it at night. So we're using your brain's natural ability of processing it by doing these bilateral movements. That's what's so cool. And it's been around, since the late 1980s. It's been studied. There's research behind it. It's been adapted. So it doesn't just have to be with, PTSD and around war veterans. It can be done for anyone. One of the coolest parts of getting trained and certified in EMDR is on the first day, they said, "We want everyone to find an EMDR therapist. You have to try it." I was like, "Okay, all right, let's see." And during the training, you're actually doing EMDR on each other. So it's really cute. It's like all these therapists, and it was virtual, and you're doing EMDR on each other. And you're going, okay, is this really going to work? And you're thinking about something, and all of a sudden it just feels more neutral. And that's just from sometimes even just 5 minutes of EMDR. Also, what's important to know is EMDR is very exhausting. 20 minutes of EMDR is equivalent to 5 hours of talk therapy.
Oh
So
my
you're
god.
just talking about, right? So some people will be like, after EMDR, they don't want to go to work. They need to take a nap. They need to go for a walk. They need to calm their nervous system down because it's so intensive. Your brain is so powerful. It's trying to heal this memory.
That's so interesting. So there's not like a whole lot of talking. Like you'll like your client, for example, like will bring up a traumatic event and like how long would they talk about it before you're like, stop right there. Let's do the eyes.
So that's such a good question, and it really depends. Most people will be like, "Just go for it, just do it." But then sometimes my clients will come in and there's not just like one or two traumas. Most people are coming in and for instance, we were talking before we started recording about like work-life balance and how work can be so exhausting for people. And so a lot of my clients will come in and be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't stand my boss. Work is so hard." And we start to maybe do EMDR and they'll start to maybe talk about it. And we realize it's not really even work. It's about the relationships that they had in early childhood. So sometimes I'll want them to talk about what's happening. And for others that might get too activated, we have to just reserve it for EMDR. When you're talking about it, your brain, if you have some PTSD, right? When you start talking about it, you're reliving it. You're having flashbacks.
Mm.
Maybe somebody will start sweating. Their heart starts to palpitate. They start having palpitations. Your body actually feels like it's going through it again. So the past is always present. So sometimes where we just reserve it, we're like, let's just do EMDR about it. Please don't talk about it. I don't want to reactivate you. And I have to actually educate them about how they're re-experiencing the event over and over again. And not that I'm just trying to quiet them so they're not talking, but because I want them to feel relief as quickly as possible instead of reliving it and feeling powerless again.
So interesting. Okay. So what drew you to practice EMDR specifically in the first place?
Colleague of mine, I was meeting her for coffee and she had been working in trauma for years. And she started talking about how she started getting trained in EMDR and started using it with her clients. And my jaw like dropped. I was so attracted to this because when you work with people with pretty severe, like I started in domestic violence, right? And
Hmm.
like I'd see clients will feel better when they talk about it sometimes, but there's such helplessness. And so when my colleague told me how fast clients were feeling better, and I started exploring, I did some research, and then I was like, I have to do this because it's the hardest thing as a therapist is to feel like clients aren't getting better and it can feel so slow in the progress. So if there's something that's evidence-based that can help them feel better faster, why not use it?
So it worked faster than the talk therapy that you were engaging in previously.
Absolutely. It's like you get more. And some of my clients will have had issues with like assaults for years and years and years and have been in therapy for years. Right. And so when we go in with EMDR around an assault, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 EMDR sessions and they don't feel like it was their fault anymore. They have less PTSD around it. They don't have the flashbacks. They notice intimacy issues that they may have had with their partner have lessened. Years of talk therapy, which is still wonderful. They're still getting a lot of psychoeducation. But when we can go in with EMDR and go straight into their subconscious for them to see it, understand it, and not feel it on a day to day basis anymore, I mean, it can be really powerful.
Mhm. That's really cool. I've yet to experience EMDR myself, and I know we were talking before this about
Mhm.
the possibility of doing, like, a mini session on air, but we can't, but I'm very intrigued because I've only been exposed to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for the
Oh,
past like 6 or so years on and off. And I'm very intrigued to experience this for myself.
oh my gosh, please do it. It's great. I probably wouldn't have done it unless I got trained in it. I was curious about it. But once I did it, like I still do it. I try to go at least once or twice a month. And I've noticed like substantial shifts in my anxiety levels. It's been huge in my life. I love it. Like I don't even want to stop going.
That's impressive. And I love this is like therapistception. I love that you said that you have your own therapist because I never
Yes,
we never think about therapists that we go to. Like you're also humans and you have your own therapy. And it's awesome. Like if you're in therapy yourself, you're constantly learning and healing like your own trauma and getting better, I imagine, like at your job.
of course, because I have to feel, like you take home what happens at work, right? I'm thinking about my clients all the time. I'm always thinking, what can we do? What interventions can we do? But I need to actually feel like my nervous system is, safe and secure and I'm feeling grounded so that I can be there for them. What's really cute is sometimes I'm in my EMDR sessions and I'm doing my EMDR. And I'm like, okay, I'm noticing this and I have to. And my therapist is so cute. She's like, I love doing EMDR with therapists because like she just kind of steps back. I'm almost like running my own EMDR session a little bit, but it helps me. I want to feel what clients are going through, right? So I love it. I'm an advocate. It doesn't mean that EMDR or therapies for everybody, but finding the things that help you, right? And not having shame about it.
Yeah, that's huge. Wow, this is awesome. I want to rewind a little bit because I know we jumped into trauma,
Yes,
but for our listeners, I want to define like what's the simplest, most accessible definition of trauma because it's not like just big dramatic events that someone might think of, right? It could be smaller issues.
absolutely. So many people could define this so differently. I'm gonna try. So there's the umbrella trauma term, right? And it's used a lot right now. Some people will define big T trauma as like assaults, PTSD things like a car accident, any place where you feel like your life or your well-being is being threatened, assaults, war, domestic violence, right? So those would be kind of big T traumas. And then there's the little T traumas. Like you come home and you show your mom this report card and it's an A minus and your mom says, why not an A? Why not an A plus? Right. So those are like nuances of things that almost like make your nervous system kind of flutter or you feel dysregulated. It can be anything. It can be somebody, teasing you at school, like your life isn't threatened, but how many people remember their biggest bullies? And sometimes even more than those big T traumas, right? Because they shift the way we see the world and they shift the way we see ourselves. So those little T traumas we work on in EMDR. In fact, sometimes we're doing those little T traumas more because it changes everything about how we see the world. The world is unsafe. People are out to get us, right? I'm glad that the word trauma is being used more, but we want to understand what it means. Trauma happens to everybody. We all have trauma, right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
some are smaller with quotes, where they're not life threatening, which is what the original definition was supposed to mean.
Right. Do you think sometimes trauma is, I think the word is over pathologized? Like how people use, I'm so depressed when they're not actually clinically diagnosed with depression?
Absolutely, right? So I love that you use that word, like, I'm so depressed. Well, clinical depression and a major depressive episode needs to be 2 weeks or longer, right? Of difficulty getting out of it, yada, yada, yada. Trauma can be different. Like, I'm glad that there's more awareness of it, but those comments that people make or being not accepted in a social group, like those things still wound us. They still happen. But also, what's important to note is that everybody responds to those things differently. So I love bringing this up when we're talking about trauma because Aileen Aaron is a therapist and she started to coin this term in the 1980s when she started to notice that I don't remember the statistics, so I don't want to quote it, but 20-ish% of people are highly sensitive. And it means that their nervous system is a little bit more sensitive than maybe the typical person. And so they'll feel pain more intensely. They'll walk into a room and they're the people that are like, oh, you're psychic. You can just feel the energy in the room. Your ability to sense things is more attuned because your brain is more active in those ways. So those highly sensitive people are a little bit more prone towards like PTSD, depression, anxiety because they're more sensitive. They feel things more. And when you're more sensitive, how does Western culture identify that? As weak, right?
Yeah.
And instead of being like, you're so sensitive, you're the beautiful artist, you're the beautiful painter. So these people, right, that are highly sensitive are probably the most loyal friends. They're like adorable, lovely people, but they're going to feel trauma differently than everybody else, especially when it's like, that's not a big deal, or just brush it off. That didn't hurt, right? Trying to say, that did hurt me,
Yeah.
but I'm supposed to believe it didn't. So what does that do? It invalidates them. And in fact, they are feeling it, but now they're like, I can't share what I'm feeling. I'm too sensitive. What's wrong with me? Right. So they're carrying that into relationships, into their future. So they might be more sensitive towards these types of big T trauma or little T traumas than maybe someone else that just has a different nervous system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and as you're saying this, I'm wondering if I'm a highly sensitive person.
Okay.
I'm like, "Oh, that resonates." Like, that is relatable.
But always know that there's a scale, right? Maybe you don't meet all the criteria for highly sensitive person. You're not a highly sensitive person, but you're in the middle. It's a good thing, right? Does it mean that you have one of those really ultra sensitive nervous systems? Maybe, maybe not. We're starting to use these titles, these names, these definitions to start to understand our nervous system.
Got it. Yeah. You brought up relationships. I want to talk
Yes.
about dating because I've been speaking with a lot of my listeners who've expressed struggles with dating and making friends as well, like platonic relationships as an adult. So, first, starting with the romantic side of dating, how does trauma manifest in our adult dating lives? For example, let's say someone is fearful of getting close to the person that they're dating for fear they'll get their heart broken, let's say.
What?
And so when you start by investigating, let's say their earliest exposures, like watching their parents
Mm.
interact, what would be things that they would have seen that they have a fear of getting close to a significant other?
I'd want to know who was your first role model and what was happening in their relationship. Maybe there was somebody who was a little bit more avoidant or maybe they felt that their love was maybe conditional with a parent, right? That they needed to be perfect all the time to feel loved. I'd want to know more of what their earliest childhood experiences around love and affection were through parents and through themselves. A lot of times, the past is always present. So I'll give you an example. A client will come in and she talks about, I just noticed like I'm just attracted to the wrong guys all the time. Like the guys that I'm attracted to, like don't want a relationship or they're like hot and heavy. And then all of a sudden they just disappear. And so the first thing I ask is like, well, what was your parents' relationship like? And they're like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. They're like together, but they don't even like each other. And so I was like, okay, so let's talk about that. And they're like, well, why would that affect me? And I'm like, well, that was what you saw, right? You're attracted to people that don't really either want to stay, that don't want to get close, where it's scary to get close. And so you're attracted to what you're trying to remedy, what was hurt for you as a child of seeing two people that weren't really that connected, stayed together maybe for the family. And so we're always trying to fix those wounds. And so what happens is we attract similar partnerships in our romantic relationships.
Okay. And just to further go down the path of like this example, and this is just like a generic example, no one
Mhm.
specific. But
Yes.
let's say it's a young girl in her 20s, keeps attracting, and she's heterosexual, keeps attracting the wrong guys, and they're avoidant and they're not clicking, and the
Mhm.
relationships aren't panning out for the long term, like it keep ending. And so she's trying to fix something in her life that was like a little T trauma, I assume, when she like viewed her parents' relationship growing up.
I don't know. It's more of a, I think it's more of a big well, it's not threatening your life, but yeah, it's like one of those
It's
gray
some
areas,
sort
but
of
it's
trauma.
big. It's huge. Yeah, yes.
And so, how would that person begin to heal this so that they can attract the right type of partner?
So what I do with clients a lot where is we will, and it doesn't have to be like always just the girl, right? But we ask like what's attractive about the bad boy or what's attractive about them. And we have to actually break it down. What do you find attractive about them? And it's literally that they're like 1 foot out the door. And this can be also for men with women as well. Like we don't need to, we're just for the context of this conversation, but we actually have to like look at that a little bit more. I do EMDR around it, but also we just start to go, well, what's attractive about them? And they just need to keep them. It's like, I need to fix it. I need to fix this person. I need to keep them. I need them to want me. Right. And so we start to dig into that and around how love manifested for them as a child, it just is so natural for them to gravitate towards that. So one of the first things I'll ask is like, well, what are the healthy relationships in their life? And they'll say, like, my friendships. I'm like, well, do your friends do that? And they're like, no. So we'll start to like explore different paths where like maybe working relationships or other types of relationships are healthier and then they start to kind of understand it. And then I'll usually encourage to go on dates with someone they wouldn't have been naturally attracted to and start to experiment of like, what does it feel like? Do you feel more safe in their presence? When it's not quite as rocky, what's happening? And so that's more behavioral if we're not doing MDR, but we start talking about it and educating them about they usually don't even understand the cycle. They don't know that they're doing it, but their body and their nervous system goes, there's still this wound. So I need to correct it. And we correct it by replicating the same behavior over and over again.
That's so wild. I like the tip of going on a date with someone you're not initially or usually attracted to, and
Yes.
then debriefing with yourself after, like, how do I feel? Yeah, this is funny. I mean, I've been in places before where I was emotionally unavailable and also attracted to emotionally unavailable people. And
Yes.
so when I think about when I could step back when I was doing the work in therapy to be able to like take a step back and realize that, and now I've changed. I did a lot of like personal work over the past like couple of years,
Yes.
and now I've changed, and right now I'm in a relationship with a woman actually,
Yeah.
and like over time, like I believe that sexuality is fluid, so my sexuality has changed as well, and
Uh,
it's so different, and I feel as though it's like healthy and stable, and she is emotionally available. We were both emotionally available at the time of like meeting each
yes.
other and getting into the
Sure.
relationship earlier this year. So it's very funny because I'm like noticing these differences now, and we've been dating for a little while. It has the potential of being my longest relationship soon,
Oh,
romantic relationship soon.
yeah. That's lovely. And so, and how did you identify that you were emotionally available? What did that look like?
I took like 2 years off of dating. I was in a really bad place in 2022 when I first moved back to DC, and it was due to a lot of different factors, but one of
Yeah.
them was heartbreak. And then I accidentally manifested another
Mm.
relationship when I
Yes.
was heartbroken and depressed and emotionally
Yeah.
unavailable. And I got into that, and it lasted only a couple of months, but it
Sure.
wasn't healthy. I became aware in that relationship that I was very emotionally unavailable. And then
Yes.
after that breakup, I had started therapy again. I had gotten on like antidepressants and
Yeah.
done a lot of work and like established mindfulness tools that I would use in my daily life, like meditation, like journaling, like positive affirmations. And then I took literally almost, I think, 2 years off of dating.
Amazing. Wow.
So I knew at that point I had done a lot of like personal development work, and I like felt inside myself that I was ready when I got back into the dating scene, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
You were healing and you weren't looking for the fix that a partner brings. I think sometimes people are so scared of being alone. And so they're wanting to date and have fun. But you weren't looking for the fix from a partner. You were trying to heal yourself on your own before you got in a relationship, which is so lovely. Right. Which is, yeah. And you attracted someone who like is your match, right? Is so I love that. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
and she did a lot of healing personal work as well. After a heartbreak, it's funny, it was, like, around the same time. We did not know each other at all.
Yeah.
She experienced similar but different, like, type of heartbreak around the same time, took several years off of dating, did a lot of work in therapy and personal development work, and got to a place where, like, at the beginning of this year, she was ready to put herself out there and started dating again, and so we both, like, were in a solid place ourselves before we
Yes.
got into this relationship. But wait, let's talk about platonic relationships, like friendships, because we briefly touched on
Mhm.
that. And I've done a lot of investigation, like talked to a lot of my podcast listeners and my community, and they've expressed that it's hard to make friends as an adult. But as humans, I know that we're all seeking community and connection.
Yes.
So, what are some of the self sabotaging behaviors that we might engage in that push away the genuine connection that we're craving?
The first thing I want to say is like social media. We tend to kind of superficially connect through social media, and that might fill this feeling of being connected, but it's kind of hollow. So, and it's safer to connect on social media than in person, right? Because we have to be more vulnerable. We make time for it. And another element is also like I think as we're aging, it can be more quality versus quantity, right? So when you're in school, are you meeting your lifelong friend? Are you meeting people because they're in the same place? You're identifying with them versus like, are those the people that you want to be with all the time? So sometimes I want to ask, can we focus on quality over quantity as we get older? And also, are you prioritizing it? Are you prioritizing maybe being on social media less and finding hobbies and connecting with people with the things that you like? Maybe it's racquetball, maybe it's art. Are you going to classes just like you would maybe in school? I think we can get so isolated these days. The trauma lens is also like, what is isolation protecting you from? Right? Is it from being rejected? Did your parents have friends
Mm.
when you were kids? What do you value more? Is it work or is it friendships? Or are you valuing your romantic relationships more? So I think that there can be so many different answers to this. What was the first model for you as a kid in your home
Yeah.
environment?
Yeah, you make a really good point. I like how you brought up that it is effort. And I feel like our culture, and I know I've talked about this a lot, so I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but I always talk about how, like, in American society, we're very individualistic. And
Yes.
obviously, there's been a lot of talks, like, for a while now, from the pandemic, especially era on, about
Mm.
this loneliness epidemic. And especially, like, if you live not in like a walkable city. Obviously, it's like more exacerbated because you have to have a car, you have to drive places, you live further away from friends, family, etc. But even in like DC, like where I live, and I gave up my car. It takes effort to connect in person. And now that I
Yes.
do work remote, I have worked remote for a while. It is isolating, and you don't have that routine of being exposed to other humans as much, like in person in the office. So it takes effort to join social sports leagues, for example, or
Yes.
get involved in like a hobby, let's say like a book club or take an art class or whatever, and go. And I know I experienced this, and I've talked to my listeners who have experienced this as well. The fear of rejection is huge.
Yes.
So putting yourself out there and maybe it's not reciprocated, like the other person thinks you're weird or doesn't want to be friends or doesn't want to put in as much effort to have like a longer term relationship.
I love that you bring up effort. What are our values? Are our values the convenience of working at home and valuing being able to, work out every day from home and do all these things? Or are we valuing connection? I think it's hard to give blanket advice of like, we need to try harder, we need to join a league because we're sometimes doing what we feel would be best for us, right? Or we're replicating similar behavior as what we've witnessed or what we've done as children.
Okay, we touched on social media a bit, and I also want to talk about that because social media is so prevalent, right, in our world. But
Mhm.
social media makes it super easy to compare ourselves to others.
Yes.
So, how can
Sure.
we manage the urge to compare ourselves when we are simultaneously trying to heal and build our own lives full of purpose?
Yes. So I'd want to start with like, what is the thing that they have that you want? How is that protecting you? Would that mean that you're loved? That mean that you're safe? Would that mean that you're successful? It's always some type of safety. So I'd want to look at that's bringing something in me that's saying, I'm yearning for that sense of safety.
I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to ask you one last question. If you had to give one piece of advice to someone in their 20s who's
Yeah.
trying to find purpose and peace, what would it be?
Listen to your gut. It's that quieter voice, the one that we talk ourselves out of. And when there's been a lot of trauma, it changes our ability to hear our gut, but always listen to your gut. Do you hear it sometimes and talk yourselves out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes.
I think there isn't enough emphasis on listening to our own wisdom. And I think that we all want to like have the answer right away. And sometimes we'll know what our gut's saying, but we do it anyway for that instant pleasure. We do it for that instant feeling of connection or love or that instant thrill, but it's not our gut. And even if we don't listen to our gut, that's okay. That's us learning, right? But my advice is always to listen to your gut.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I want to give you the platform too to share if people want to
Mhm.
connect with you, if you're open to that, share your website,
Yes.
your socials, wherever.
Yes. So my website is my EMDR LA. I don't love social media, but I'm trying. I'm really putting myself out there and being vulnerable. I'm on TikTok now. It's my EMDR LA. I'm on Instagram, which is how we met. My EMDR LA. Yes, reach out if you're interested in EMDR. I'm licensed in California and Nevada for right now, and we'll see what happens soon.
And I'll include everything in the show notes so it's easily accessible for our listeners.
Beautiful. Thank you. This is so fun. I really appreciate you welcoming me on here.
Thank you so much for being such an incredible guest. I've benefited a lot personally, and I know that my listeners will benefit a lot from this conversation.
Thank you for being vulnerable.
You as
And
well. It's very eye-opening and relatable and definitely helps people feel less alone, like especially from a therapist being vulnerable.
I appreciate that. Yes, we have to be vulnerable. It's in listening to our instincts to be vulnerable, even though it doesn't always feel warm and cozy to do that. Yes.
Love that. Thanks for listening to The Naked Truth with Lauren. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review it on whatever platform you're listening or watching. It helps other women just like you to find the show. And if you have a friend who needs to hear this episode, share it with them. If you want to hear more from me, sign up for my community gratitude practice newsletter at thenakedtruthwithlauren.com. You'll receive a quick dose of gratitude every week to help shift your focus from what's missing to what's meaningful in your life. And you can follow along on Instagram at thenakedtruth.pod for more inspiring content. Catch you on the next episode.